Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I'm your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan, and it's our last and final episode of the offseason. It is, by the time you guys are hearing this, it's training camp reporting day. It's the first day of camp, preseason.
You know, Grump, I was on the train today and I was thinking about it, that now my brain is clear. You know, we are far enough away from like basketball in the Stanley Cup. You know, baseball's just doing its normal thing now. And it's like, okay, you know, it's not that we haven't been preparing for preseason and training camp, but now it's like I am ready to kind of fully immerse myself in training camp and getting ready for this season. And it's like the perfect time. So I took the train. I was going down to Pennsylvania today, went right by Secaucus. I saw, you know, the Ferris wheel where the Meadowlands were. And I was just like, yeah, only a few more weeks and we'll be doing this for real. And that got me a little excited. So.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks away from Detroit Lions' first preseason game. Isn't that kind of crazy?
It's nuts. It's really crazy. Like, you know, like when they have the Hall of Fame game, it's just like, oh, we just started training camp like 5 days ago, and then boom, it's there.
Yeah, you know, it does kind of have that feeling you're saying, like with the Stanley Cup, NBA Championship, and the MLB All-Star Week. It has that feeling like, you ever get that thing when you're like a little kid and you're coming home from like a long road trip or whatever, you fall asleep in the car. You don't wake up when you're in your driveway. You wake up when you're like one exit away from home.
It literally happened to me on the train on the way home tonight. I fell asleep and I woke up right before the train goes into the tunnel back into the city. So yes.
Yeah, it's like that. You wake up and you're like, oh, we're right around the corner. Holy shit.
Yeah. We're here. Be careful what you wish for, Grump, because that means the Giant season's almost here.
Hey, man, I'll take a losing football season over a lockout any year.
Oh, well, that goes without
I love
saying.
Football. So
I love you, too.
We do have more episodes of Hard Knocks coming up, which is a little annoying because that continues to bleed into what I would consider to be, like next week's episode. I think I'm going to be a lot more serious. Like this is training camp. I take for real. The off-season stuff is, a little bit more laid back. So we'll have to split some Hard Knocks stuff with some real stuff, and I don't really know what's going to take precedence.
Well,
but
quite frankly, I think we're done after next week, right? Isn't it only 5 weeks or 6 weeks?
I can't remember if it's 5 or 6. That's the thing.
Quite honestly, what's really left? I mean, we have an episode of the actual draft.
Mm-hmm. And then it looked like minicamp was in that too. So
okay, so what's possibly left? Like the scene in Spaceballs where they're kind of looking at each other in real time. Like, I mean, I don't know what's left.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But let's get into this Hard Knocks episode here. And what I think is really interesting is that I didn't really feel like this was all that illuminating so much as it was just kind of cool and entertaining.
You know something, Grump? And I said this before the show even started. This is not investigative reporting. This is not analysis. This is entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the purpose of this show is to break any, news that we didn't know before. I mean, I think this is kind of a peeling behind the curtain view of what actually happened. I mean, we know what happened. We know the results. And now we're just seeing how did it unfold in real time. So I kind of went into this show not being like, oh, what am I going to find out this week? What are my top 10 things I didn't know about the Giants? It's just interesting to see, just how it plays out.
How it all went down,
how a phone call between GM to GM actually takes place. Is it buddy? Is it serious? Because everybody here has calls at work and there's different tones each of these calls. So that to me is, I'm not learning anything here. I really didn't expect to learn anything. And you'll notice too, as we're getting into these episodes, you're seeing things now like the TV screen is blurred. Mm-hmm. You see their little note cards are blurred. They're starting to get a little, we already know what happened in the draft, but they're not. That stuff is proprietary stuff. They're telling you what they want you to know.
Yeah,
which is fine.
Would say so. Yeah,
which is fine. I'd rather them do that than, have your fly down and showing your little wee wee. So
Yeah, I mean, even so, I would say a lot of the access in this episode was less than in the past. Like we had a brief moment of players showing up for their top 30 visits. There
Hmm.
wasn't really not that much there, which is fine. But I mean, just like the behind the curtain was a real peek at the Wizard of Oz here. It was really
Sure.
not, all access. And I know Art Stapleton really wants to keep both bumping in this show and keeping his Twitter engagement there, but like this was a great entertaining episode, but really not. I don't see the access. I didn't see it.
You're not
um
going to get it. You're just simply not going to get it. It's
yeah.
just the way the show is. Look who produces it. Look who has creative final artist, final say in everything. I mean, it's just enjoy it.
um
I have a bunch of little notes.
Go
Do you
ahead.
want to go
No,
first?
no, I have only a couple things, so let's see what you got.
A couple things are kind of funny. A couple things are kind of a little head scratching. We're watching the show, and Cranky Wife goes to me, "Your coach is weird." And the guy is kind of a weirdo. I mean, just kind of like personality wise, he's one of these guys, like if you work in the IT department who's like really smart, but just has a weird personality and just, may not play well with others. And you could see how, combine that with his temper, which he kind of alluded to on the show, you could see these personality issues. So, you know, every time you hear about something like the Wink Martindale situation or Mike Kafka, it's like this is an odd cat, this guy, and it shows more and more the more you kind of don't have the press conference interview or the very packaged view of him.
Well, what did you think was very weird? Like, to me, the weirdest thing I think he did was the the cigar birthday phone call.
He just seems kind of goofy.
Hmm,
He seems like a guy, and something for a head coach. I kind of want this.
sure.
This is a guy like other coaches who spends 90 to 100 hours a week in the office preparing his football team and then spends the other, 40 hours of the week thinking about those 90 hours he has to work.
Hmm.
And when you are so dedicated to that, like you guys out there, you're all Nick fans. Tom Thibodeau, there's pictures of him the day after a playoff game wearing the same clothes he wore yesterday, getting gas at 6 in the morning. I mean, these guys are, you know, they're so committed. They're more committed to their craft than we will ever be at our jobs. And it takes a certain personality to be like that. And you're gonna be an odd bird when you're like that.
Um, I thought it was very interesting. Um, there was a lot of allusions to which quarterback they were going to trade up for throughout this show, and teasers for this episode and the
Yeah,
past episode. And I think
want
it's
to talk about
really
this.
interesting, the Jaden Daniels or Drake May thing, because um they tease a whole lot of Jaden Daniels and Brian Dable liking Jaden Daniels. They don't spend a whole lot of time talking about Drake May. But at the same time, they are fully aware that the first two picks going are most likely going to be Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. They say it straight up. Joe Shane seems to know it. So at all times that they're talking to New England, it's Drake May. They know it.
Mhm.
So I find it really interesting because at a certain point, I think that they were operating under an, I would say, over 85% certainty. And I don't mean the day of the draft. I mean, even leading up to that, I think like an 85% certainty that they're sitting at 6. They are
Oh,
very happy with Malik Neighbor. Like that trade, all this
that
trade, like all the, and I'm like, I know these events happened. Like Joe Shane walked over to Elliot Wolf way back during the combine. He started those conversations way back then. He's making all these phone calls to try and understand all this stuff. But I don't know. At the end of the
I
day, it felt like they knew that it was just not going to happen. And it seems so obvious because the top 3 teams needed quarterbacks. It just doesn't make sense.
Here's the thing is I think, this process goes on really from almost January 1st to now. We're talking, 4+ months almost of evaluating and coming to that decision. And I think most teams know who they want. And the rest of the time is spent dealing with, decision trees and stuff. I mean, you saw that PowerPoint presentation they did to the owners, which I thought was really fascinating. It's like, we have this all mapped out.
Hmm.
We are game. We know what we want to do, but we know what we're going to do when. And I think that's really important to, I'm a big process guy. Process to me is just as important as results, because results are kind of random a little bit. You can prepare for something, but the process, how you get there. And I think it seemed they were very confident that Neighbors was the guy realistically they were going to get.
Hmm.
One thing that kept coming up was Mara, as he kept kind of stumbling around and, biting his way into each of the rooms and stuff and talking, was he kept referencing 20 years ago. And he's like, this is exactly how it was 20 years ago. This is completely different than 20 years ago.
Thank you. Go ahead. Keep
And
going.
let me explain why I think this is completely different. 20 years ago, there was a quarterback who did not want to play for the number one team at the number one pick in the draft. He said it. It was leaked all over the place. We knew it. So when
And
you
it's like
have,
pre-Twitter, pre really the internet what it is now.
sure, I remember waking up that morning and like, okay, this is going to happen. I'm pretty sure this is going to happen. I mean, when you lose leverage, everything changes. Like the Giants had no leverage in this draft this past year. 20 years ago, they held all the cards. Because if you look back at what the trade was, that trade was not an insane haul. That was not the Ricky Williams trade, which they alluded to in the episode. That was not trading, three number ones. It wasn't no draft day from the movie type of ridiculous trade. It was pretty fair for a number one, and not just a number one pick. I mean, Caleb Williams, I think, is going to be a pretty decent quarterback, but Caleb Williams is not in that stratosphere of what Eli Manning was thought to be coming out. Peyton was coming out to be. Joe Burrow, the Andrew Luck. He's not that. So I can see where he's coming from, but it really was not the same thing. And I think that most importantly, Joe Shane knew that as well.
What I think is really interesting about that too is, which again, this is more of what I was kind of talking about, where I didn't find this episode all that much illuminating or like any sort of insane access, because a huge chunk of this episode was taken up by Kids Come to Work Day and John Mara talking about 20 years ago 3 times. But in that, and you had Ernie Accorsi on the screen too talking as well. But so much of what makes that different to me was 20 years ago, and John Mara says it straight up, there was a guy, and Ernie Accorsi was sure about the guy.
That's what I was saying.
But when you hear Joe Shane talk to John Mara, you're hearing numbers, hit rate. You know what I mean? Like, they're not even talking about a particular guy. They're talking about one of the 3. It doesn't feel the same at all. So at all times, when you're talking about this move up to 3 to get one of the guys, you're talking only in realistic numbers, right? Like, nothing that is going to be, I mean, like Joe Shane says historic. He mentions Ricky Williams, but I mean, forget that. Ricky Williams is a trade that will never, ever, ever happen again.
And you're also dealing with an asshole too back then as well. Like,
yeah.
So we don't have that many assholes running teams anymore.
But you know what I mean? Like, this doesn't feel like that at all. This is kind of just like playing the numbers game, and there is no like, I am sure of this guy, because they're not sure. They're just sure of the caliber of player, the talent, or the need, or whatever it may be. But you're talking strictly in numbers and
Listen,
how to make the team better. That was different because they were like, this is the right temperament, this is the right attitude, this is the right player, this is the right skill. This is what we build around. That is totally different.
Listen, Grump, just because they have a potential get out of free card with the way Daniel Jones' contract is structured does not mean
It must be exercised.
It must be exercised, or they are any obligation or pressure to do so.
Right.
And the other thing too that we just don't know, they may be still sold completely on Daniel Jones. This might be our guy. He's had, I don't want to keep going. We know everything about Daniel Jones, but
right.
we all assume that either they're out on him, or what I'm saying is get out of jail free and start over with, financially. But you know something? Yeah, if you could, I might have a nice, I might have a nice BMW. I really love that car. No reason really to trade it. Okay, sometimes it breaks down, but I kind of like the car. If I had the opportunity to get a Porsche, I'm gonna, upgrade and get a Porsche. But I'm also not trading, my second son for that Porsche either.
Right.
So I think a lot of this is a lot of people making assumptions that the Giants are really ready to move on from Daniel Jones, and you know
I mean,
they're not at a gun to their head that they have to do this right now. Otherwise, they would have mortgaged the future to move on, and they didn't do that.
yeah. I mean, I do think that there's a lot more of feelings about Daniel Jones that are never going to be aired on this show or leak out anywhere else. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
I do think that, but at the same time, I just think that they were realistic the whole time. It never made any sense that any of the top three teams were going to trade with us because they all needed quarterbacks. There were a clear three, and then everything after three was kind of a murky, and one of them was a division rival. It never ever really made sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, while those discussions absolutely happened, you even hear the tone of the phone call. It was 4 hours before the draft. Um, you know, Elliot Wolf is just like, yeah, it's going to take something to really knock my socks off. Like we are very comfortable just taking a quarterback right here. You're going to have to make me uncomfortable taking a quarterback. Do you know how hard that is for a team that needs a quarterback? It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, I, 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 to me, the bigger takeaway was really just that we never really even saw which quarterback it was that they were really hoping it would be. It's not really discussed. They kind of allude to the fact that it might be Jaden Daniels for Brian Dable, but they don't really say it. He doesn't really say it. So, I mean, once you're talking in hypotheticals, like one of the quarterbacks, now you're really just as Joe Shane says in there, he's fishing. He's got a lot of poles in a lot of different pools.
Should
So,
be. And much like us, when our annual family fishing trip, we didn't catch anything. So,
correct.
yeah. The other thing that kind of struck out was something in the very beginning, and I'm curious what your take on this. What's with being all chummy chummy with Saquon Barkley?
Oh, I mean, it was a scout, wasn't
I don't care. Go fuck yourself.
it?
And that's my honest opinion.
Well, here my real question was, why are we talking about where John Runyon is going to play?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, if you want to be cordial and polite and say, "Hey, what's up, Saquon? Good luck in Philly," and walk away, I'm fine with that. But all of a sudden, it's like, we're doing Inside the NFL with Saquon Barkley interviewing about our players. A division rival now? That was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I don't know why they kept it in there. I mean, it made us look weak. And it was ridiculous pandering to Saquon Barkley fans to have him on there again for something. To me, something, Saquon Barkley, you had the absolute right to do whatever you wanted. You were a free agent. You had the right to match offers and bring back to the Giants. You had the right to tell the Giants to go fuck themselves, whatever. But guess what? As soon as you make your decision, there's consequences. You are no longer part of the Giant family. You are done. You are an enemy on a division rival, a hated division rival. And for the Giants to make the decision to have that on the show, I think is a disgrace and kicking your fans in the face. I really do.
I honestly felt like that was HBO knowing that this episode was not all that interesting to casual viewers, and it's a for sure thing that anything with, because I mean, like, really what you're talking about is that was a Penn State pro day where they're scouting a future Giants draft pick who I'm very excited for.
Yes, me
and
too.
and he also happened to be there. So to me, like, that was really, I mean, that was silly. It doesn't make me mad or anything like
I,
that.
I,
But
I thought it was embarrassing, and I thought it was an insult to Giant, especially now Saquon has gone on every show he can to badmouth the Giants. So
good for him. When he's
that's fine. So
eight
why are we
yards down behind the line of scrimmage with a broken ankle, I will care even less. So
so why are we sucking off his pencil now on a
yeah, I
show
don't
like
know.
that? It's ridiculous. I think that
Well, I
was a
mean,
major screw
also
up.
I will say it was Carmen Brasillo that was talking about that stuff, who's barely even a Giants coach at that point. So
I don't care if
I
it
don't
was
know.
Carmen Sandiego. I don't care who it was. That should never have been on the show.
Yeah. Um. Otherwise, I didn't really have anything on this episode other than it was fun, and I'm glad I watched it. Also, you were saying with the PowerPoint presentation, I guess all that kind of stuff, which throughout this series, they've shown that stuff and it's been blown up on the screen, and I couldn't tell if it's actually being played on the screens in the office or if it's an HBO post-production thing while he's talking. And I still can't tell, but I think it really was playing on the screen. And it goes back to when Joe Shane was hired, just how much money he dumped into the front office facilities to upgrade their stuff for the scouting department. And I do think that stuff was all actually on the screen, but it's not super easy to tell.
Yeah, and some things you could tell there was a lot, like I said, a lot more blurring this episode because they had some sort of like graphic up on the screen. I think it was like it might have been their big board or something, and that was clearly blurred.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that should be. I'd be annoyed if that was out there. I mean, there's some.
Absolutely.
I remember years ago, we were in a charity event at a team. I'm not gonna say what team it was, and we got to go into into their draft room, into their war room, and it was maybe a month or two after the draft, and they still had everything on the board, and they told us, no pictures, don't even think about it. So I could see the sensitivity of what they have on these things.
Oh, sure.
Of course, after a friggin' month, I'd probably erase it, but that's just me.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so Hard Knocks, at least one more episode, maybe two. I don't know, but
Cool.
One more. Starting today, training camp. Very excited. Detroit Lions in 2 weeks. We got joint practices coming up for that. Biggest thing is Evan Neal is starting camp on the PUP list. Questions, comments, concerns, Cranky?
Well, concerns, obviously. I mean, it's
right.
This is not a random injury. This is a trend, and this is a pattern, and we are getting closer and closer to the B word. And again, nobody has revisionist history goggles. We can't say, you whiffed on that, you fucked up on the pick, but it's a bust. I mean, everybody in that position would have made the same pick. Everybody was dancing around. I think you were doing the show with the Talking Giants guys. I was at an anniversary dinner with the wife, and I remember getting the text, not only from you but from others, like, this is fantastic. We got Kayvon and we got Evan Neal in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was. I don't know. Let's boil it down to the basic thing. If I can get the best offensive lineman in the best conference in football, I'm taking a shot. And unfortunately, whether it's, health, attitude, whatever, it's just not working out. So the question becomes, what are we going to do about it?
When it comes to performance for Evan Neal, I am holding off on the B word because he has had an offensive line coach who is now no longer with us. And so I am willing to hold off on, I want to see what he does with a different O-line coach. I want to see what this O-line coach is all about, et cetera. And I know,
Agreed.
Yeah, I know. The health thing is certainly an issue, but again, this is one of those things where if you're going to give him a real shot, if he's not 100% back from his ankle injury, and you got to start him on the PUP list, and you start him on the PUP list. But it's not encouraging. This is a guy that, I want to see him work with this O-line coach, and that means every practice he can get. Now, it is possible that he's on the PUP list for less than a week.
It's true.
So it's not necessarily something that I'm immediately shaking my head about, but it's eye-opening. Well, I didn't expect this. Did you?
Well, I didn't expect this, but it was earlier today. You texted me that we picked up a lineman, and you were like, "Is this adding to the conspiracy theories?" And I was like,
"He's in for a visit." There was a visit.
Okay, he was in for a visit, though. Mm-hmm. You think the two are related? For nothing else?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's not
off-season depth. I mean,
they didn't make the decision to put him on the PUP list 3 minutes before the announcement. So yeah, absolutely. And it's no shock to me that they went to someone that has worked with this offensive line coach before, in Las Vegas last year. So no, but I mean, also the NFL is very different. Roster construction is very different post-pandemic, right? They've relaxed rules with the practice squad. Veterans are allowed on the practice squad. There's so many promotions and demotions allowed now
Yeah.
that we Tom Coughlin famously said that you're as good as the 53rd man on your roster. I would actually say you're as good as the 55th man on your roster. And I think in reality now, in the post-pandemic world, you're as good as the 60th man on your roster. I mean, all of these spots are super important. And that's why, like bringing in Cole Beasley last year, was super important. We didn't end up really needing him. But
I
with
I
all
want
the
to.
with Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, like all the slot question marks, it was important that we had someone in the building, understood the offense, and that more than anything, the coaching staff was comfortable with bringing in if needed.
I think I want to modify that a little bit to say you're only as good as the best player on your roster and your
Well,
worst.
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I know, because that's a little bit of a cliche of like you're only as good as the last, like the weakest link in the chain. But if you're going to be really good, you need to have your strongest link has to be really good too. But I get your point.
Yeah.
Um, no, I mean I failed to connect the dots when you sent that to me today. I was just thinking, well, they're still trying to get depth and they still need to get, better in this offense. I didn't even think for a minute that
No, neither did I.
something's going on because you even said it. I think, I can
Yeah,
even look up
but
the,
I
yeah.
was thinking depth. I wasn't thinking he's not ready to go for training camp. I mean, shit. So,
Yeah.
here's I'm gonna say what I'm looking for out of this training camp, and I'm gonna keep this brief because training camp is gonna be all we're gonna be talking about for the
Yeah.
next couple of weeks, and then we're in the season. So my basic thing that I'm looking for is, and maybe this is a bit of a two-part answer, but it's still fairly basic. I want to see a tougher training camp. I want to see guys battling for positions. I don't want to see practice ending early, unless there's extreme heat or a storm coming in. You know what I mean? Some
Mhm.
kind of extenuating circumstances. Not just, well, they had a good week of work. Like, no, you had a good week of work, finish it. Finishing is everything in the NFL. It's a
Yep.
long 18-week year.
And
Finish.
it's a long 3-hour game.
Yeah. Finish everything. Everything must be finished. That's number one. And number two is, and it goes hand in hand with that, with the true battling. Battle. Quit fucking around. I need to know who, me. Why do I need to know? I'm a fan. But they should need to know. They should want to know who has the depth chart. Brian Dewell is calling it a rep chart, not a depth chart. Fine. You have a couple weeks. Preseason games are important. They are not just practice. This is not, let's see how he does. You want to see how he does, you see how he does in the first week. After that, you're getting ready for week one. Week one is not, a feel out period for me. I don't like this thing that NFL coaches.
You're stealing my thunder.
I'm
Keep
sorry,
going.
but yeah. So tying this in with Evan Neal, if Evan Neal is too hurt, I don't want to be screwing around figuring out what the right tackle is going to be, and holding out hope that when Evan Neal comes back from injury, if he's not ready week one, you have to be prepared to go 18 weeks without Evan Neal, in my opinion. If he's not ready to go week one, you need to be as confident in your week one starter as you will be in your week 5 starter, your week 10 starter, and your week 18 starter. Quit screwing around with the offensive line. And I can't say this any better than Bobby Skinner did on the
Yep.
Talking Giants thing, which was, if you want to move the backups around from left to right, move them from left to right. Don't move guard to tackle. Don't move tackle to guards. Quit fucking around. This is, they say it all the time. The offensive line has been Daniel's detriment. It's been the offense's detriment. Well, quit screwing around.
Yeah.
Pick and go. Be confident in your decisions. Stick to a decision and go. Get them ready. You have guys like Jermaine Illuminator that can play inside, but if Evan Neal is not ready, put him outside and stick with him outside. Figure it the fuck out.
And if it works, keep them there.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So go ahead.
My thing is, the big cliche always is this is a copycat league and everybody wants to do what seems to be working. And the trend over the last couple of years has been, weeks 1 through 3 are kind of like your real preseason. You're really getting ready for it. No, the Giants are simply not good enough to throw away 1, 2, 3 weeks of a season. Nothing?
Don't throw away anything.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So my point is like, I always say the same thing. We've been doing this show for 42 years now. And I say the same thing. Goal number 1, don't get anybody hurt. I have a new mantra this year. be prepared to win week 1. That's what I want this offseason to be, and this training camp and preseason thing. I want to be ready. So opening kickoff, first possession, first snap, first quarter, first game, we're competing to win, not to feel our oats, to get ready for the season. That should be done in these next 6 weeks, because again, the NFL is also a game on the margins. And if everybody else is doing that little, well, I'm not going to have quarterback X play at all in the preseason or something. Something, Daniel Jones, you haven't played in God knows how long it's been. Get out there and practice and play. So we could steal a game. We could steal that Minnesota win. We could steal a Washington win. We're 2-0. It's a completely different vibe. And we've said this 100,000 times in this show. Vibes mean everything. You're much more, oomph in your step when you're practicing, when you're 2-0 as opposed to 0-2. And this is an important year. I don't think this is a critical year. I don't think this is do or die year. I don't think any of that stuff. But I kind of want to get this thing moving in the right direction. And let's stop focusing on making sure that nobody gets. Obviously, you don't want to be reckless and foolish, but the game is played for 80 years with people getting ready to play week 1, and there can be a balance with technology and all this stuff now that we can do that, but we have to be ready to play, because that might be our secret sauce from salvaging a really bad season to a game we play, a season where we have meaningful games in December.
I mean, let's be real. It's a game. It's a game in which you get hurt. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Getting hurt. The only way to prepare to get hurt is to get hurt and know how to get back from it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you said, don't be reckless. But
work your bones.
We don't have the Hard Knocks behind the scenes access to 2022's training camp and 2023's training camp. But from an outside observer, 2022, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen came in here with no friends. You know what I mean? This is not a roster that they constructed. It was a roster that they were inherited and added only a few pieces to, and they went to work. And it really felt like Brian Daboll ran a meritocracy training camp. He came in there with no friends, and people earned shit. Remember Darius Slayton, who has led the team in receiving yards like every year since he got here, didn't even have a starting spot in week 1. Week 1, forget training camp.
He was trying to trade his ass.
Yeah, he was way behind on the depth chart and earned his way there, even though he had, sort of earned the right to not have to earn his spot. You know what I mean? In some level of thinking. And then 2023 rolls around on the heels of a good overachieving year, better than expected expectations, better than expected results. And all of a sudden we're ending practice early and guys aren't going that hard. And, no. What do you think brought you success? Like, it is not insane to me that results followed the way that they did.
Working hard shouldn't be just fancy things you paint up on the walls of 1925 Giants Drive. Right. It has to be a philosophy, a mindset, something that's practicing what you preach. Mm-hmm. And until we see that, you're going to have these shitty starts. You're going to have injuries. You're going to have these things. I mean, what we did last year did not work.
I agree. Yeah. So that said, now that we're nice and negative, training camp starts today. So really, really excited. I have all kinds of different things that I want to look for, training camp battles and such. But, there's positions, we've talked about them top to bottom. I don't want to get into that unless you have something in particular that you're really, really eyeballing. We know the positions of weakness, where the battles are. I am mostly just looking forward to right now, Wednesday, July, 24th? The rookies. I'm excited to see the rookies and how they do, how Daniel Jones throws to Malik Neighbors, how Tyler Nubin does picking those passes off, that sort of thing. I'm excited to see them in action and not just in the clouds of my mind fantasizing about what this team could look like.
The most important thing to me is I want to see Daniel Jones. I want to see somebody that looks like he's recovered from his injury physically and mentally.
Yes.
That to me is the biggest thing. I want to see, and not only just mentally, like, okay, I have no problem cutting or doing these things I did before, but is he once again the captain of this team? Is he once again in charge of this offense? Is it once again, okay, guys, I'm back. I'm taking over. This is my team. And those are things you see in camp when you're there watching. So to me, this whole thing starts and ends with Daniel Jones because he is the most important person on this team by a wide margin. And he's one of the biggest question marks on this team by a wide margin too. So that's my focus to start. I mean, yeah, there's lots of battles. Like I'm curious to see, how the wide receiver room is going to shake out, how the defensive backs are going to shake out. What is the offensive line going to look like at the end? But something, it all starts and ends with Daniel Jones.
Fair enough. Yeah, you're not wrong. I want to see that killer instinct back with Danny. I know that's sort of
just be in charge.
Yeah.
Just be. I don't want to see, again, kind of to the point of being prepared for the regular season. I don't want to see if we go to camp one day and it's just like, dicking around, going to, if they're doing like a 10-minute, 11 on 11 or something, just lackadaisicalness. I want to see purpose. I want to see replication of what it's going to be like in September. I want to see, real bullets in the chamber.
So then that means that we have to finish off our pens and pencils season predictions now, and we are down to the final 3 weeks. So this is where it gets kind of really murky. So week 16, the New York Giants, December 22nd, just before Christmas, are playing at 1:00 in Georgia at the Atlanta Falcons. Who's the quarterback? Is it still Kirk Cousins? Is it Michael Penix? And is this a win or loss, Cranky fan?
Well, it's the annual family Christmas party event, one of our favorite weekends of the year that's usually ruined by a Giant game. I've told you before how much I hate Mercedes-Benz Stadium, right? How I've seen 4 different of my teams lose in that evil house of horrors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've already seen the Giants lose there, so it's not going to be a first time for this.
I was with you.
That's right. That Monday night game. Was it Monday night game or Sunday night game?
It was Monday night.
Monday night? Yeah. I look into my crystal ball. I think Michael Penix is going to be starting.
Interesting.
And I also think this is the game where Michael Penix has the breakout game where people get excited about him. I think, at this point in the season, I think our young secondary is starting to get done for the year. Like, long season, an injury or two, relying on so many young guys and stuff. I think there's some exploitation back there. I think Michael Penix is, I'll go even bolder. I'm going to say he's going to be NFC Offensive Player of the Week this week, and I think Atlanta wins in pen.
Wow. Interesting. Not a bad thought. Atlanta could be, the NFC South is a total mystery to me, but Atlanta, like even what's his nuts, the punter, Matt McAfee was saying, how. That was a team that really is talented, just didn't have the right quarterback in the system with Desmond Ridder, and before that Mariota. You know what I mean?
They've had backups. And shouldn't even be there, guys. I mean, my question for you, Grump, is this the best team in the division? I mean, last week we talked about the Bucks last week, where I said they could go to the Super Bowl or have the first pick. This might be the best team in the division.
Well, I'm inclined to agree to some extent with McAfee, but it is a little bit pie in the sky. That's speculation. You know what I mean? It's the same thing that we've been saying about the Giants for forever. It's an excuse. They're great. They're just missing this. It's like, yeah, it's the NFL. Everyone is great, and they're all the ones that aren't winning are missing 1 or 2 really important things, and then suddenly they're winning. That's what it's like. So it comes down to, is the addition of Kirk Cousins the answer? And you're saying you don't even think Kirk Cousins is playing this game.
No.
So that and to your point, Atlanta certainly felt some level of uncertainty and went and took Michael Penix. So
I think I kind of like what they did, to be very honest. People were like, what are they doing? What kind of draft is this? But to me, I think Kirk Cousins is the perfect bridge, and that bridge doesn't necessarily have to be 3 games, 6 games, year 1. Mm-hmm. I think it's whenever Michael Penix is ready to take over, he takes over, and you don't have to rush his progress with him now.
Well, yeah, I guess you're right. Yes.
Yeah. So I kind of like that. You know, what's the old saying that iron sharpens iron?
Iron.
Or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know, if you have some scrub who you brought in just for Michael Penix, do you want? Well, you know,
It's
you
a
probably
waiting game at that point. It's
you're probably
just a
just going to
ticking
start
clock.
him, and he maybe not even be ready.
Well, that's sort of that's why I was going to say, like, well, uh, you could say that about a lot of guys, but it's not true because usually you're waiting out the clock on whoever's already there. But Kirk Cousins was brought in this year. Michael Penix was brought in
Well,
this year. So there is no ticking clock for when Michael Penix is going to start. Michael Penix may never start. He may never look good in camp. Kirk Cousins may look incredible. He may earn a second contract to close out his career in Atlanta. We don't know. It's totally possible.
They also might have a fantastic trade chip.
Sure.
Either in Cousins or in Penix. You don't know. This league is about depth. This is about having assets and about having flexibility. And listen, this may be an unpopular take, but situations change every single day. If you made a decision in March about free agency and something was available to you, or you just had a change in heart and you think now that's the right decision to make, you make it. Again, I don't think it's a bad thing having both of these guys on the roster, especially when Penix is, relatively cheap. It's not like you brought in two high-priced quarterbacks who are fighting for a thing, and you're going to have, $30 million sitting on the bench. I mean, what is Penix going to make in his rookie deal? It's not an incredible strain on the salary cap, right?
Not
really.
I mean, no. I mean, it's not. But it's not nothing either. I mean, like some draft picks are like, dude, it's like we're talking about $2 million right here. Like, it's not that.
Okay, but it's also like, how much?
It's not $40 million.
Right. It's like, other teams have backups that are, how much should a lot of these backups go in this year? What's the name with the Giants last year? Went to the Jets. How much did he make?
I don't know, 6-7 million.
6-7 million. I mean, I don't think Penix is making much more than that, if he even is.
Yeah, I mean, nevertheless, this game, you may like what they did. I think this is a win in pen for the Giants. I think that this is going to be two teams fighting for the wild card spot.
Okay.
And Atlanta may even be in first place in the NFC South, but if the Bucs are right behind them, then what's the difference really? You're still fighting for every win you can get. You're scrapping. And it might be that last wild card spot, that in the hunt, that Fox Sports in the hunt kind of thing,
way on the right and way on the bottom.
Yep.
The quadrant you don't want to be in.
Yeah, but I mean, like, when you're really thinking about that last wild card spot, you're really talking about hovering around 500 most of the time. So it's not insane.
Yep.
And I just think that I have the Giants on a catastrophic losing streak up until this game, and I think that this is the game that they sneak out a win right before Christmas. I think just, you've been to that dome a couple times. It doesn't have a strong energy atmosphere. It's indoors. No. It's away from a lot of the elements. It allows you to play a little bit more loose. It feels like a basketball arena to me.
Yeah,
man.
It's not a crowd that's right on top of the field. Mm-hmm. It feels cavernous. It is. I'm sure the roof will be closed. It just doesn't. And also, it's Atlanta. I mean, that's never been a crowd known unless they're like in the NFC Championship game when they start bandwagoning. But
right, no, I agree with you.
If this team is like fighting for a wild card, I mean, it'll probably be sold out, but you're not getting, not dirty bird nonsense or anything.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm feeling this one as a win on Sunday when they need it to hang around.
Nice.
And then we head ahead to Week 17 at home versus the Indianapolis Colts. This is going to be December 28th or 29th, so I hope you didn't factor the date into this. But what are your thoughts, Cranky fan?
Something, I feel like the season's wheels are falling off at this point. The question is going to be who's quarterbacking for Indianapolis. I mean, Anthony Richardson, God bless him, but the guy can't stay healthy either.
Well, it's been 1 year, right?
Well, I mean, hey, who watched him in college?
Yeah.
He was hurt, banged up. He runs for 70 yards, but he hurt his hamstring. He's out for 5 games. He comes back, he's out. He's out. You never know with him. That was the big knock on him, was he just can't stay on the field.
Hmm.
And what happened? He's out, for pretty much the whole year last year. So um, I don't really think it matters. I think we're kind of in that the season is kind of spiraling out of control. I think we lose this one too. But I'll say, I'll be generous and say it's a loss in pencil.
I kind of feel the same way. I have this as a loss in pencil. I didn't really consider Anthony Richardson not being the quarterback for this, but I actually think Anthony Richardson hitting his national stride this year in some regard.
Hmm.
Maybe your mom doesn't know who Anthony Richardson is, but the people who barely pay attention to sports at work are like, yeah, that Richardson kid, when did he
Yeah.
come to the NFL? Yeah, I think that's going to be his year this year.
I,
I think he'll have a couple AFC Offensive Players of the Week, that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that's going to happen this week 17 against the Giants, but I do think that he'll be playing well enough that this will be a struggle. I think that, this year, I think the Giants are going to make strides, and I think that we're kind of slowly predicting that, but it's not in the cards that they're going to be a serious playoff contender. They might sneak into a wild card, but we're not really looking at a division championship or anything like that. We're not. I don't think you or I think that they're really truly competing with Philadelphia for number one in the NFC East, or maybe not even with
I don't think
Dallas
they're
for
really
number
competing
two.
with Dallas number 2.
Exactly. So, and I agree. This is a young team, and young teams are not used to 20-week seasons. So I think the wheels are starting to fall off here, and I think that it's a loss in pencil. They just collapse. It's not a horrible game, but it's a game they needed to win, and they fall short. That's what I
Yeah.
feel like.
Hey, if it's a game we need to win for anything, I'll consider this a successful
In
season.
week 17, absolutely.
Yeah. If they need to
Sad.
win, if they need to win this to save some jobs, that's a different story. But I mean, if it's like, if we're on the bottom of that, sort of in the hunt quadrant of the screen, I consider that a win. Real quick about AR again, I think he's going to be a quarterback you're not going to judge based on his stats
Right.
ever.
No, but
It's
he'll be
it,
highlight plays for
it's
sure.
going to be like, wow, look at that. I think he's like I think he'll be like a poor man's uh, Jackson.
Okay.
That's I don't think he's not as consistent. He's not as accurate as Lamar Jackson, but he's gonna have one play a game and probably one game a year. You're like, whoa.
It's interesting you say Jackson and not Newton.
Newton was more accurate.
Okay.
Newton was a better quarterback. Like Newton also was like as big as AR is, Newton was just like a freaking beast. I mean, I remember when he was a freshman at UF and Tebow was playing, and it was just like, who is this friggin' monster? And he'd come in garbage time and like, oh my God. And we also knew he was going to transfer because just the way they were spaced out. This guy's not sitting on the bench after this year.
Right.
Now, thankfully for everybody, he stole a laptop and he cheated on a test and just was a piece of garbage. But yeah, AR is he's not as accurate. And
Okay.
that's a big difference. You got to be able to throw in this league.
And that brings us to week 18 away at the Link, Philadelphia. Again, this is either going to be January 4th or 5th. Cranky fan, how are the Giants closing out the regular season in 2024? Really, the beginning of 2025.
They're going to win this game in pencil because Philly's not playing anybody.
Okay.
That is basically my analysis, and it doesn't have to go any further than that. It's a complete irrelevant game for the Eagles. I think they had locked up the 2 seed at this point. They can't be 1, they can't be 3. This is what they are. And in spite of the normal narrative of them just loving to dig the Giants anywhere they can, I think they're on a bigger mission this year than to, piss off Giants and Giant fans. They have to be extremely successful in the postseason or people are losing their jobs. And I think that path is not dicking around in week 17, playing Jalen Hurts and he potentially gets hurt and a completely meaningless game. So I think you'll see scrubs all over the place. And I think when it's scrub on scrub, I think we have more to play for, and I think we would win that game in pencil.
I think it's hilarious you said that because I have this as a loss in pen. The Giants are just not going to win this game. It's the end of the year. I think the wheels sort of fell off. The steam, or the wind was out of the sails for the playoffs at the loss against the Colts the week before. But on the flip side, in Philly's never-ending attempt to peg the New York Giants, Saquon Barkley gets hurt in this game. That's my prediction. The Giants lose. It's in Penn, but in their quest to try and cuck us, Saquon Barkley gets his ankle twisted, and it screws up their playoff, and someone gets fired for it.
I don't even think he makes it to week 11.
I mean, you're probably right, but I mean,
Yeah.
he's not usually a guy that when he's out for the year. He is definitely a guy who is more than comfortable playing through injury. We've seen it. So I think he certainly gets hurt early in the year, but I think that there's no business in him playing in this game other than they're playing at home. They want this for their fans, the home game against the Giants. And in that stupidity, something happens, and it could be a dirty play. It could be a fluke. It could be the shitty turf.
Or just Saquon being Saquon.
Sure, yeah. Or it could just be shitty ligaments, right?
Yeah.
And I think that happens, and it screws up their playoff run. They blame everything on that, and someone ends up getting fired for it. That's my prediction as of, July 24th. And that closes us out. So I am archiving all of our predictions here, and we're going to go over. I'm going to hit you with your record and your wins and losses, not today, but right before the regular season starts, after training camp in a couple of weeks. And I want to know how comfortable you feel about those picks, not really considering what happened around the league. Well, I guess considering if someone's tears an ACL in training camp and is out for the year.
You have to factor the rest of the league.
But I mean in terms of performance, what you saw around the league in the preseason. Injuries you can consider, but performance around the league. We'll see if you want to adjust right before the regular season.
If that's a criteria, probably not much at all. I think it's really based on injuries and things.
Right.
I don't even think anything. Even if there's going to be camp battles and positional battles with the Giants, but I don't think anything is going to be solid to say, oh, now we're 3 wins better, or oh, now we match up so much better against Pittsburgh. I think this is kind of what we are, unless something catastrophic happens where we come out of camp missing an offensive lineman or a quarterback or something.
Sure. All right, so that's it. That wraps up our 2024 off season. I hope you guys had a great summer. I know a lot of you didn't listen, so happy to see you in a week, both in person at the training camp practices, again at the regular season once it starts, and back here on the YouTube channel or Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, etc. So remind your friends as they get back into the football swing, those who haven't paid attention all summer, about the Just Giants podcast and where they can find us. You guys are our street team, so just be a friend and tell them about a good show. And we will be happy to see you all next week with our first preseason episode, training camp wrap up after 1 week. Until then, go Giants.